Right, now we get up close and personal with this little camera. Let's see what all the buttons and all the settings do. This button here, which most cameras have, is to allow you to take off the lens. You can just screw out that wee piece of plastic, but when you click a lens into place on this thing, well, the piece of plastic just sort of screws in to protect it from dust and anything else. The lens clicks into place, and this button here, which most cameras have beside the lens, is the release button. So you hold that in, and then you can unscrew the lens. Bottom of the camera, not much else to talk about here. Already showed it all off. That's where you screw in the likes of your tripod, or your handles and gimbal and that type of stuff. And this wee slot here, which has a locking mechanism, like most cameras do, is where you put your battery and your SD card. Right hand side of the camera here, not all cameras have this, but this one does. This is a slot for 3 separate options, and those slots are a 2.5mm remote jack, a HDMI micro slot, and a dedicated AV out / digital slot. Now, what do these 3 ports do and what are they for? The 2.5mm remote jack, I'm sure you can probably guess where this is going, connects a remote control record button essentially to the camera. So if you set up a shot and you don't want the camera to be shaky when you're clicking the record button on the top, you can attach a remote to it through that jack and start the recording on a different device that you hold in your hand. These last 2 do the exact same thing, just different formats. This is for if you want to either A, to watch back the footage, or B, while you're recording, be able to see the camera screen on a bigger monitor. HDMI or analog or / digital AV out, right? Also, on the other side has one of these. This, I probably don't have to explain what this is. This is so you can attach a safety strap, but where we're going, we don't need safety. I'm joking. You should probably use your safety strap. Because I don't do that many handheld shots, or at least ones without the gimbal, I just don't use mine because they get in the way, especially in the gimbal. They get all tangled up in the, when the gimbal's doing its thing, and that's not very good. Other side, only 2 things here, just like most cameras. You have another one of these for the safety strap, and then, like I showed you earlier, a microphone jack which has a 3.5mm microphone jack on it. Now, that is for, like I said, when you have a microphone, an external one that you want to use on this camera. Now on to the meat and potatoes. The top / back of the camera. Right. This green play button, most cameras have these too. Click that, and that's how you view the footage that you recorded. The display, which I'm not going to press, okay, maybe I am just for you guys, changes how much detail you see on the screen. You can see when I pressed it once, it took away a lot of the details, about the battery and what recording mode we're on. Press it again, it gives us a balancing measure to let us know, so I can see how straight the camera is. But maybe you don't want all of that. Maybe you do want the balancing thing. It basically allows you to cycle through and choose how much information you see on screen versus just the standard, which is this. Up here in the left hand side here, this wee, looks like a bolt of lightning. That's your flash, right? Now, disclaimer, never use that, probably never will. If you're coming to this tutorial, I'm learning to try and learn photography, you might learn a few things, but I'm not going to be getting into stuff like the flash and how to use that, because I'm not a photographer, I'm a videographer. Down here, we have a wee D-pad with a button in the middle. Maybe make it out, I'm not quite sure, but on the right hand side is white balance, right? So white balance, this camera has some pretty nice built-in ones, along the bottom here. You can choose, either let the camera do it by itself, auto white balance, or different options for what type of setting you're in. Maybe it's a sunny day, maybe it's a cloudy day, maybe you're in a house, or maybe you're in very dark light. Or you can set it manually. I will go more in depth in a future video about setting your own white balance, which you should always do. Okay, the top one on this D-pad is your camera's ISO, or ISO some people say. ISO basically is your camera's sensitivity to light. The lower your ISO is, the less sensitive to light your camera is, while the higher it is, the more sensitive to light that it is. So just like your white balance, this basically is done on a case-by-case basis, where depending on where you're filming. Now the bottom button on this D-pad, FN3 or function 3. You also have function 4 here, function 5 there, function 2 there, and function 1 there. What do they all mean? Well, a function button, when you first get your camera, doesn't do anything. I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. It can be, you can basically bind something to those buttons to, maybe in the setup you're using, certain buttons that you would normally use are hard to press because of where the camera is. You can bind it to a function button, or maybe there's other things that don't even have a dedicated button on the camera, maybe changing the quality of the resolution of the footage. Instead of going into the settings to do that, maybe you bind it to a function key, and by pressing that key, the camera does it. That's what your function keys do. Now this wee area up here, now if you're recording films, or even if you're doing clientele work, I would always recommend, you can see there it says MF, that's manual focus. That means whenever it comes to using, say, a lens, the focus doesn't change unless you tell it to. Some cameras have great autofocuses. This camera is not one of them. That's probably the only complaint I do have, is the autofocus on the G7 is not very good. But usually when you're doing a film or whatever it is, I would always have it manual focus selected. Of course you can go up here and change it to autofocus as well. I would always have manual focus selected. And you can maybe see in this button here, I'm not sure if you can, it has a button that says AF/AE lock. Well, AE, you obviously know what AF stands for, autofocus. AE is auto exposure, right? And what you would press the auto exposure autofocus lock button for is if you want to change something about the scene. You want to maybe reframe the scene, move the camera, but you want your exposure settings to stay the same, you press that button and it would lock them in place. But as you can see, I have the focus dial pointed down to manual focus, and I never change that. Always manual focus if possible. Now if you're doing maybe fast-paced social media content, or maybe if you're done like I was doing, you're filming a live wrestling gig and people are moving about a lot, sometimes if your camera has great autofocus, that might be beneficial, but I would always personally go with manual, even if it meant that I had to change it on the fly quite often. And lastly on this wee D-pad, this here is basically just how you change whereabouts the camera's focusing on in the scene. Pretty simple. Besides the menu button here, which I purposely left out, that is all the buttons on the back of the camera showing off, apart from, like I said, menu and some of the stuff on the screen. We will leave that to last. What we'll do next is look at the top of the camera. Okay, so first off the bat, function, already covered that, what it does. This here, I have never used on this camera. This is the button you press. Whoops. When set to photo mode, that is how you take photos, but it also works as another way to press record. But this is of course the record button here, the red dot. As red dots always appear on the screen when you're recording, like that. Already explained what this wee ring does. It's how you change on the menus, but the wee button in the middle basically brings up information about the white balance and the ISO. This right here is pretty self-explanatory. Off and on. Camera's off, camera's on. These two things now, right? I've never used this because I don't take photos with this camera. So disregard that. This one is the meat and potatoes that we're looking for. This ring here, right, really quickly. This wee one here, it looks like a camera with the M, stands for creative video mode. Records motion pictures with a manually set aperture value and shutter speed. You cannot take still pictures. If you're here to make films or record any type of video, this is what you want to use. I never use this camera out of this mode. Basically, no photos can be taken, it's purely for video, and you get to set the aperture value and shutter speed yourself, so everything is manually in your control. The C here stands for custom mode. Use this mode to take pictures with previously registered settings. That's what it says in the tin. I don't take pictures, don't use it. This one, it looks like a stretched rectangle, is panorama shot mode. It says pretty much what it says in the tin. You can take panoramic images. I tried it once, it's pretty cool, but I don't take photos. The one that says SCN is scene guide mode. This mode allows you to take pictures that match the scene being recorded. Sorry, what was that? Pictures? We don't do that here. This one here, it kind of looks like someone mixing paint. It's creative control mode. Record while checking the image effect. That's basically, you can set up, camera effects, similar to like stuff on Instagram, Snapchat, where you can tweak colors and all that. You're not getting like filters and crazy stuff out of it, but it allows you to save, camera effects and try them out. This one here that has IA on it, it stands for Intelligent Auto Plus mode. Allows you to adjust the brightness and color hue when in Intelligent Auto mode. You don't need to worry about that. I know that sounds complicated, but you don't need to worry unless you're a photographer, which we're not. Program AE mode. Records at the aperture value and shutter speed set by the camera. Basically, in layman's terms, you don't have to set them yourself, but once again, primarily for photos, we don't need to worry. The A is for aperture priority AE mode. AE, obviously, like we said earlier, is auto exposure mode. The shutter speed is automatically determined by the aperture value you set. Pretty self-explanatory, which leads to S, which is shutter priority AE mode. The aperture value is automatically determined by the shutter speed that you set. So it's basically, which one of these two do you not want to set? And then, it'll let it do the other one for you. Photos, I don't do it. Manual exposure mode. The exposure is adjusted by the aperture value and the shutter speed, which are manually adjusted. You adjust the aperture value and the shutter speed of the camera, it handles the exposure, but I don't use this one either. This one is what you want to use.